I'm the Executive Director of PEN America. In the days after the 2016 election, days spent in days, we at PEN America were an organization of words at a loss for words. Attacks on the press and journalists felt like a carnival water gun game in the circus of the campaign. But now would they be more like live fire exercises ordered with the approval of the President of the United States? What could the triumph of reality television spell for literature? The stunned stupor didn't last long. Castigations, conspiracy theories, and counterfactuals began flying fast and ferocious. Just as the din became deafening, barely 24 hours after the concession speech, it was PEN trustee Masha Gessen who first began to broadcast not noise, but signal. Her piece, Autocracy, Rules for Survival, published on November 10th, served as a national permission slip for the resistance. She opened by mocking politicians' post-election pieties. We owe him a chance. We're all actually on one team. Masha Gessen wasn't having it. To her, the presumption of good faith was not just rebuttable, but rebutted. Her prescriptions were simple. Believe the autocrat. If he says he's going to ban Muslims, he's going to ban Muslims. Institutions will not save you. And simpler still, stay outraged. When Masha joined the PEN America board in 2014, she was newly back to the United States after 2 decades in Russia. She'd been surveilled, spied on, and smeared for speaking her mind and skewering Vladimir Putin in her books and journalism. She had pulled up stakes only when the government signaled plans to target lesbian and gay families, separating children from their parents. With 3 kids at home, that was enough for Masha. The family came to New York. We thought her firsthand perspective could help guide our work on behalf of imperiled writers living under unfriendly governments around the world. We didn't quite imagine she'd also guide the work of writers living under an unfriendly government here at home. But so she has, offering candid advice, experience, and license to react with energy, alarm, and alacrity to attacks on the press, assaults on truth, and onslaughts against the infrastructure of a liberal, rights-respecting society. Masha's views are not doctrinaire or predictable. With all of Washington on high alert over possible Russian interference in our election, she's taken a contrarian stance, declaring the machinations more red herring than red scare. But her immediate, innate clarity in the face of this political moment has given millions leeway to write their own rules on how to survive. In the last line of her piece, Masha called for resistance, stubborn, uncompromising, outraged. I'm not sure if she had de Gaulle in mind, but after the news today, it's hard not to think of her in the tradition of Vive la Résistance. Masha's call on November 10th fired the starting gun for the Women's March, the airport protests, the lawsuits, and the town hall sit-ins. So far, some of the worst-case scenarios have been averted. Travel bans suspended, punishments against sanctuary cities stayed, dismantling of affordable health care slowed down. It might be comforting to think some of Masha's dire warnings were overblown. That this is not an autocracy. But we should not mistake autocratic tendencies tempered by determined resistance for anything other than autocratic tendencies. The success of the resistance thus far is not reason to relax, but to redouble. If Masha sounded the starting gun, the person with the bullhorn egging on the runners and offering doses of refreshment in this marathon is Samantha Bee. Masha Gessen's recipe for how to survive autocracy actually doesn't include humor. The Russian version of full frontal would probably have gotten Samantha sent to a Siberian penal colony. Today we gather in the historic Great Hall at Cooper Union, base camp for Abraham Lincoln's national political ascent. Lincoln once prefaced a discussion of the draft Emancipation Proclamation by reading aloud from a favorite humorist. When some cabinet members frowned, he said, "Gentlemen, why don't you laugh? With the fearful strain that is upon me night and day, if I did not laugh, I should die, and you need this medicine as much as I do." Samantha Bee is serving up that medicine night after night in what we hope will likewise be a preface to a new Emancipation Proclamation. Masha Gessen's rule number 1 for surviving autocracy is believe the autocrat. For the rest of us, though, there are a couple rules that come even before that. Our rule number 1 is listen to Masha Gessen, and number 2 is watch Samantha Bee. So let's get on with it.
Introduction. I'm going to keep this brief so that we can get to the fun part. But I want to talk about language, and I'm going to start with a conversation that I had a few days ago when a few of the Russian writers who came here for the World Voices Festival came over for dinner, and we were talking about what everybody in Moscow is talking about at the moment, which is a huge urban renewal project. And the idea of the project so it says, is to raise all the 5-story concrete block apartment buildings that were constructed during the big residential construction push in the 1950s and 60s. The problem with that plan, though, is that all those buildings have already been demolished. And the Moscow project of raising the 5-story buildings from the 1950s and 1960s is actually aimed at bringing down other buildings that are in good plots of land that are suitable for development. They're not 5-story apartment buildings from the 1950s and 60s, but they are being classified as 5-story apartment buildings from the 1950s and 60s. And that is actually a problem of language. A Russian poet named Sergei Gandlevsky once said that in the late Soviet period, he became obsessed with hardware store nomenclature. That he loved the word secateurs, for example, garden shears in American. Secateurs is a great word. It has a shape, it has weight, it has a function, it is not ambiguous. It is also not a hammer, a rake, or a plow. It is not even scissors. In a world where words were constantly used to mean their opposite, being able to call secateurs and nothing else secateurs was freedom. And freedom, on the other hand, as you know, was slavery in World War 1984. In the USSR, we had laws, constitution, even elections, also known as the free expression of citizen will. The elections, which were mandatory, involved showing up at the so-called polling place, receiving a pre-filled ballot where one office was matched to one name, and depositing it in the ballot box out in the open. And again, this was called the free expression of citizen will. There was nothing free about it. It did not constitute expression. It had no relationship to citizenship or will, because it granted the subject no agency. The effect of calling this ritual either an election or the free expression of citizen will had a dual effect. It eviscerated the words election, free expression, citizen, and will, and it also left the thing itself undescribed. When something cannot be described, it does not become a fact of shared reality. Hundreds of millions of Soviet citizens had an experience of the thing that could not be described. But I would argue that they did not share that experience because they had no language for doing so. At the same time, an experience that could accurately be described as, say, an election or free had been preemptively discredited because those words were used to denote something entirely different. When I was a young journalist, I went back to my country of birth to work in my native language. And in the early 90s, Russian journalists were engaged in the project of reinventing journalism, which itself had been used to perform the opposite of conveying reliable information. And they were trying to reinvent it as a credible enterprise. Language was a problem. The language of politics had been pillaged, as had the language of values and even the language of feelings. After decades of performing revolutionary passion, people had become weary of the very idea of passion. So the new Russian journalist opted for language that was descriptive in the most direct way. We tried to stick to verbs and nouns, and only to things that could be directly observed. It was the journalistic equivalent of the hardware store. If the shape of a word could not be clearly described, and its weight could not be measured, it could not be used. And this kind of language is fine for describing things that are in front of your eyes, but it's terrible for conveying what's in your mind or what's in your heart. It's impossible to discuss ideas in that kind of language. It was very constraining. And writing in Russian was a challenging exercise akin to navigating a minefield. One misstep could discredit the entire enterprise, one false note, and you could no longer be trusted. Compared to that, and because I kept writing in English at the same time, the sense of freedom that I had writing in English, where words weren't off limits, for the most part, that was freedom. And then, things in Russian got actually worse. A new government came in and did new damage to the language. Vladimir Putin declared a dictatorship of the law. That was one of his first self-descriptions. His main ideologue advanced the idea of a managed democracy. Then when a guy named Dmitry Medvedev temporarily became president, he said, famously for Russians, "Freedom is better than unfreedom." Now words didn't mean their opposite anymore, they just meant nothing. The phrase dictatorship of the law is so impossible as to render both dictatorship and law meaningless. And Donald Trump has an instinct for doing both of the kinds of violence to language that are familiar to me from speaking and writing in Russian. He has a particular nose for taking words and phrases that deal with power relationships and turning them into their opposite. Think about, for example, how he used the phrase safe space, right? When talking about Mike Pence's visit to Hamilton. There was the vice president-elect. He was booed and then passionately and very respectfully addressed by the cast of the show. And Trump was tweeting that the show should not have happened because he said theater should be a safe space. Now, the thing about the phrase safe space is that it was coined to describe a place where people who usually feel unsafe and powerless would feel exceptionally safe. Right? Claiming that the second most powerful man in the world should be granted a safe space in public turns the concept precisely on its head. And he really does have a talent for doing this. He performed the exact same trick on the phrase witch hunt, which he claimed was being carried out by the Democrats to avenge their electoral loss. Witch hunts cannot actually be carried out by losers. Big or small, the agent of the witch hunt must have power. And of course he has seized and flipped the term fake news in much the same way. But he also has a talent for using words in ways that make them mean nothing. Everyone is great and everything is tremendous. Any word can be given or taken away. NATO can be obsolete and then no longer obsolete, which challenges not only our shared understanding of the word obsolete, but also our shared experience of linear time. And then there's Trump's ability to take words and throw them into a pile that means nothing. I'm actually going to subject you to an excerpt from an interview that he did with the AP for the 100 Days. It was really hard to choose because actually the entire interview is like this, right? So here's Trump. Number one, there's great responsibility. When it came time to, as an example, send out the 59 missiles, the Tomahawks, in Syria. Period. I'm saying to myself, you know, this is more than just like 79 missiles. This is death that's involved, because people could have been killed. This is risk that's involved because if the missile goes off and goes in a city or goes in a civilian area, you know the boats were hundreds of miles away. And if this missile goes off and lands in the middle of a town or a hamlet, every decision is much harder than you'd normally make. Unintelligible. This is involving death and life and so many things, so it's far more responsibility, unintelligible. The financial cost of everything is so massive, every agency, period. This is thousands of times bigger in the United States than the biggest company in the world. Now, I made a partial list of words that lose their meaning in this passage. Responsibility, the number 59, the number 79. Death, people, risk, city, civilian, hamlet, decision, hard, normal, life, the United States. And even the word unintelligible inserted by the journalist means nothing because how can something be unintelligible when uttered face to face in an interview? And the role of the journalist is also rendered meaningless in the most basic way. The interviewer feels compelled to participate, and so he interrupts this incomprehensible monologue with follow-up questions, or words like, right. But these serve to create the fiction that something is indeed right, or it could be right, about what Trump is saying, when in fact he's saying nothing and everything at the same time, and this cannot be right. And Trump's word piles fill public space with static. This is like having the air we breathe replaced with carbon monoxide. It's deadly. The space that he's polluting is the space of our shared reality. This is what language is for, to enable you to name secateurs, take them, use them, to make it possible for a surgeon to name scalpel and have it placed in her open palm, to make sure that a mother can understand the story her child tells her when she comes home from school, or a judge can evaluate a case being made. None of this is possible when words mean nothing. Now, we writers have often spent time, much of it in the late 20th century, questioning the ability of words to reflect facts and the existence of objective facts themselves. There are those who have, whether with glee or with shame, observed a sort of relationship between those postmodern exercises and Trump's post-truth, post-language ways. But I think this reflects a basic misunderstanding or perhaps a willing conflation of intentions. When writers and academics question the limits of language, it is invariably an exercise an exercise that grows from a desire to bring more light into the public sphere, to arrive at a shared reality that is more nuanced than it was yesterday, to focus ever more tightly on the shape, weight, and function of anything that can be named, or to find names for things that have not in the past been observed. Our ability to do this depends on a shared language. My second quote is not from Trump, it's from Hannah Arendt, which should be a relief. She wrote, "We know from experience that no one can adequately grasp the objective world in its full reality all on his own, because the world always shows and reveals itself to him from only one perspective, which corresponds to his standpoint in the world and is determined by it. If someone wants to see and experience the world as it really is in quotes, he can do so only by understanding it as something that is shared by many people, lies between them, separates them, showing itself differently to each and comprehensible only to the extent that many people can talk about it and exchange their opinions and perspectives with one another, over against one another. Only in the freedom of our speaking with one another does the world, as that about which we speak, emerge in its objectivity and visibility from all sides. Only in the freedom of our speaking with one another. And to preserve that freedom, we have to become guardians of our language. We have to keep it alive and working. That means being very intentional about using words. That means, for example, calling lies, lies. I'm addressing specifically National Public Radio, home to the word misstatement, among others. The NPR argument is that the definition of lie, the argument for not using the word lie when describing what Donald Trump does, is that the definition of lie involves intent. A lie is a statement made with the intention to deceive, and NPR does not have conclusive information on Trump's intent. The problem is that the euphemism misstatement clearly connotes a lack of intent, as though Trump simply took an accidental wrong step. And the thing is that words exist in time. Right? The word misstatement suggests a singular occurrence, thereby eliding Trump's history of lying. The word misstatement, as applied to Trump, is actually a lie. It is actually a lie to think or to claim that they're neutral words. Words exist in time, words reflect a history, words reflect an understanding. And using words to lie destroys language. Using words to cover up the lie, however subtly, also destroys language. Validating incomprehensible drivel with polite reaction also destroys language. This isn't merely a question of the prestige of the writing art or the credibility of the journalistic trade. It is an issue of survival of the public sphere. In Russia, first they came for the words of politics, value, and passion. Then they came for the words of action, the words that describe buildings, the numbers that denote dates, and then there were no words left to speak. And it's not just a Russian phenomenon. Here's what Confucius had to say on the topic. If language is not correct, then what is said is not what is meant. If what is said is not what is meant, then what must be done remains undone. If this remains undone, morals and art will deteriorate. If justice goes astray, the people will stand about it in helpless confusion. Hence, there must be no more arbitrariness in what is said. This matters above everything. There will come a time, and it may not be all that soon, I'm afraid, when we have to think about recovering from the damage done by the current era of American politics. And I fear that there will come a time when we, individually or in groups, discard certain words because they have been robbed of their ability to mean something. I can give up tremendous. But it's our job to make sure that we enter the post-Trump future with other words still usable. Law, freedom, truth, power, responsibility, life, death, the number 59, president, presidential, unprecedented, lie, fact, war, peace, democracy, law, justice, love, secateurs. Thank you.
Masha a chance to introduce me. I just ran right up on stage. Not cool of me. I'm sorry. It's always so much fun talking to you. You always scare the hell out of me, and yet I find you so reassuring somehow. I think it's the same way that I go home at night and I try to relax watching The Handmaid's Tale. Okay. I have strange impulses. What do you want to talk about? I have questions for you. I could start, but you go ahead. What do you do? Can I start? I have a million questions for you.
I have my say.
Do you feel like this? Do you feel like you are witnessing this administration being normalized?
Yes.
Great. Next question. I feel that I am seeing that as well, and I'm curious how you see it through your worldview.
So I think that the tools that that we have developed, over decades of writing and talking about politics have to do with normal politics.
Right.
And so at 100 Days, there was actually a lot of taking stock that had to do with, the fact that he hasn't gotten any legislation passed. That's changed. That his travel ban was stopped. That the attempt to deprive sanctuary cities of funding was stopped. And so there's a very tempting conclusion that, we've just got this crazy guy in the White House,
right.
but that doesn't matter because our institutions are so fabulous.
Right.
That is a kind of normalizing, because I don't think it takes into account, first of all, what's happening tomorrow, but also the damage that's being done to language and political culture.
I don't think people really understand how many of our institutions are really based on gentlemen's agreements. They're not as codified as people would assume them to be, and that is problematic.
Well, and even those that are codified, like conflict of interest law
Yes.
rules, or the emoluments clause of the Constitution can apparently be violated without any regard for what it says in there.
Language is under assault. Truth, obviously, under assault. What happens when there are no words left? Or, oh, that's so sad. I guess what I mean is, how do we reclaim words that seem to be losing their meaning? Can we? I mean, I feel like I'm watching people bending over backwards to find the president presidential. They keep announcing that he's presidential. I don't even know what that means anymore. It doesn't mean anything
I think it
to
means
me
throwing
anymore.
bombs, firing missiles. I mean, that seems
Yeah.
to be every time he invokes war, he's recognized as being presidential.
Right.
Or, when he shows that he can read, which you claimed that he couldn't read.
Pardon, say again.
You had that great segment on how he couldn't read.
Oh,
and then
yes,
I read
on
that
camp.
whole speech to Congress.
Yeah, no, he is not. I know he practices really hard. I feel, no, he does have to practice a lot. But I mean, I actually, I would never want to, that was a great segment. He definitely can't read, but I feel sad for him because it would seem to me that he has something unchecked that he's never attended to in his life, or his parents never helped him. It's I'm not actually mocking him for that, but we should, what would be great if we had a president who could stand up and say, hey, guys, guess what? I'm dyslexic. How do you feel about that? Like if we had someone who could be honest instead of living in some kind of terrible shame about it and has to launch bombs at countries to make up for that. That would make me happy.
And this presidency, if you set aside for a second the nature of the person who's the president, this presidency could be so amazing in so many ways. I mean, we have a president who has been divorced and remarried, who has a blended family, whose wife is an immigrant.
It's very reflective of the traditional regular American family. It's
Really?
He mirrors us in ways that previous presidents possibly haven't. Oh dear, how many marriages have we all had? I'm only on my first one. I'm just getting started. You have said to me and others that it's not enough to simply point out the lie. And I think that's very interesting. So we have, our news media is, they're trying very hard actually. And I think the lower third has been helpful in identifying which statements of Trump's would seem to be lies, but it doesn't seem to be enough to me to just say, he's doing this, he's not, or, he said this about that, it's a lie. And then to not get to the root of what the lie was. That is where I think we are faltering. See if you agree with me. You don't have to.
I do agree with you. I have no idea what we can do about it, but I think that...
Okay, great.
I mean, there have...
Me neither. So anyway, hope you had fun.
No, but I think that, there was this idea, especially during the campaign, that fact-checking was like this brilliant anti-Trump tool. And then
Well, I love fact checkers.
Fact checkers
They're
are
amazing.
the best. Sometimes they're incredible pain, but still they're the best.
Yes,
But,
it's a painful.
But then after the election, there was this real crisis for a lot of journalists, not just that journalists had failed to predict his victory, but that it felt like the profession no longer meant anything. Like nothing we do, no amount of fact-checking is going to make a difference. And I don't think that's entirely true. I'd like to think that something can make a difference, but I think that fact-checking is not enough. You kind of have to always be writing the bigger story. Not
Context.
not just that he lied about this, but maybe point out the fact that he's always lying.
Right.
Or that, we have a president who cannot be trusted. Or
Right.
can be trusted to lie.
Or that there's a world of truth behind the untruth that we just heard, and what is the truth, actually? As opposed to just identifying that something has happened that's unacceptable, or even, I feel like sometimes even I am a victim of this, where I'll see the lower third chiron and go, good one, and then move on. It becomes a source of amusement. I know that fraudulent news, of course, is passed around on both sides of the partisan divide. Have we failed the critical thinking test as a nation?
Well, yes.
I mean, it's obvious.
What's your next question? No, I think that I've spent a lot of my life thinking about conspiracy theories. And I used to think, and this is sort of conventional wisdom about conspiracy theories, is that conspiracy theories take hold when there's a clear lack of information about something, right? So something hasn't been investigated, or something is a mystery, and then you create conspiracy theories. But I think actually conspiracy theories take hold when something unimaginable happens.
Right.
And then we'll look for a way to explain it and to make the world make sense again. And it's natural, right? People are sense-making creatures. But that's, I think that feeds into the spread of fraudulent news on both sides, because it's great when you get a news story that explains everything all at once, and you don't have to think about it again.
On our show, we've tried to highlight the danger of propaganda and hashtag fake news. It feels like the more you try to hit people over the heads with facts, the less they want to believe them. How do you combat that? People are studying this. Important people, tremendous people are studying this. It's almost impossible to talk people out of a rumor or a myth that they have come to believe. I don't have the answer to this question either. I'm just saying it to seem smart. It's not working. It's fine.
No, I'm just wondering if that's true, actually. I think you can. I think it takes a lot of convincing. And there will be people who will always stick to their conspiracy theories. But actually, I also think that pointing out that conspiracy thinking is, a symptom of looming autocracy is important. And then maybe, we can be a little bit critical of our own tendency to buy simple theories. But life is a mess.
A country like Finland, for example, has taken, they've taken measures, or they're taking measures to combat fake news. And it really, do you know much about it? They're doing it at a level that we have not been able to do. It's a smaller country, it's very different from us, I understand that. The one thing that they do have is near unanimous agreement in the government that fake news is a problem. They speak openly about it, which we haven't here in the past, haven't taken it seriously enough.
What a terrible example, because there's a story behind.
Oh no, did I say something terrible? Uh-oh, it's a terrible
No, it's just,
example.
it's a great example of a country that actually dealt with fake news, but there's the story behind it. Is this guy who was a Russophile in Finland. His name is Jochen Beckman, and he has very close ties to the Putin government, also to sort of this far-right ideologue in Russia. And about 10 years ago, he started this campaign of spreading fake news in Finland. He would go on talk shows, he would publish these articles about how the Finnish social services were taking children away from Russian women in Finland. And Finnish media realized that they had no tools to use against somebody who was using access to media in bad faith. They fact-checked him up, down, and sideways, but it would always happen after he would make one of his explosive statements. And so, yes, then, using the fact that it's a small country and it is actually conceivable to get people together to talk about this and to sort of come up with rules, they confronted it. But I'm saying it's a terrible example because it actually is a clear and present case of Russian meddling.
Right, yes. I mean, are we too fractured? Are we just too fractured a nation for that kind of united effort? I mean, I saw an interview with, it was from 2012 or 2011 with Mitt Romney and President Obama, with President Obama really poo-pooing a lot of concerns about Russia when they were together. Are we too fractured to come together and have a conversation? Is that what is making it exceptionally difficult to combat? Oh, I mean, we have a president who embraces it wholeheartedly.
That's a problem, yeah, the president thing, but...
That's an overall kind of theme of this conversation.
But I also think that, things aren't quite as bad as they can seem when we talk about sort of the fractured public sphere, and when we start talking in this, I really don't like this, when people talk about sort of the right-wing bubble and the left-wing bubble. Because that's not actually true. We actually have a healthy public sphere, fairly healthy public sphere, sort of to the left of the center-right, right? From the center-right into about the center-left. There is a sphere in which ideas travel, in which people are routinely exposed to people who have other opinions, and in which people actually, in the media that they consume, get answers to questions that they didn't ask. That makes it very different from the Breitbart bubble, which is actually a bona fide bubble. I mean, people who consume Breitbart and its little satellites never are exposed to opinions that they don't share, and never get answers to questions that they didn't ask. And so it's a false equivalence. And I think it's a good idea to know that it's a false equivalence, and to know that we have something precious to protect.
I noticed that one of your articles was cited in, that new New York Times blog, right, left, partisan reading, essential partisan writing you should not miss.
Partisan writing you should not miss. And the subhead was, from Ann Coulter to Masha Gessen.
I saw that, and I was so excited for you to be in such good company. Oh my goodness. Speaking of false equivalence, and then I read, the public editor, Liz Spade, I read something that she had written in 2016 about hoping that, journalists aren't mindlessly tallying up their stories in a back room to ensure balance. And I do feel like some news organizations are now absolutely doing that. I feel like there is a real, I guess just a metaphysical kind of chalkboard that is in my brain right now, and there is a tally happening to ensure this kind of false balance. Are you seeing that?
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is that it's really a question of where the center is, right? It's like that amazing comment that Van Jones made after that presidential speech about how Trump was presidential. What was really remarkable to me about his comments was that he said there are those people who have wanted Trump to just continue to be a crazy clown. I'm paraphrasing, but something like that. And so then there are those who wanted him to become president of all Americans, right? And it was sort of a typical, it's not even a journalistic device, it's almost a journalistic tick of placing the president in the center, and then, people who are equidistant from him ensure objectivity. So there are those on this side and there are those on the other side. But he's not in the center. Right? So that's...
I would do a quiet clap over here.
That's the thing that we need to come to terms with. But that really requires sort of reevaluating what a lot of people have been taught for their entire journalistic careers about how you practice journalism and where you locate the center, from which you then travel right and left to ensure balance.
I think we're seeing that too. I mean, MSNBC has a bunch of new hires who are, I would assume, skewing a certain way. I feel like in the for-profit news world, it's very problematic, and you see it. I mean, I'm just watching it on all I do is watch news, so I'm seeing it every day. Oh, how
other people just watch you.
Oh, that's okay. It's exhausting. I understand. Just tape it. You can watch it when you're ready. How do you... There was one thing when... Because Masha's been on the show several times, and I just love listening to you. I think you're great. I think you're great. That was ridiculous. One thing that you said to me that I have never forgotten, and I have said to other people as though it's my advice, so that I'll seem really cool. No, I'm just kidding.
It wasn't the thing about the nuclear holocaust?
No, that too. No, I give you credit. Is that one way to combat, and I just want to share it all with you, is that one way to sustain your outrage and to stay in the correct place is to draw a line of acceptability for yourself and never ever cross that line. And it really meant a lot to me, and I just wanted to tell you that, but it has worked. I've drawn that line for myself many times. Do you feel yourself coming up against your lines occasionally, or do you maintain a pure sense of outrage at all times? Because it's tiring.
I had a brief vacation after I left Russia and came here. It was like a couple of years when I didn't have to be outraged all the time.
Okay.
I feel fairly comfortable living in outrage.
Okay. You too. You just love to... Me too, in general, but sometimes people don't want to talk to me.
That happens to me.
I feel like somebody's going to ask me to leave the dinner party at some point. To be the crazy maniac in the room is not always fun, but feels important.
You can come to my house.
Okay. No. We're just going to vacation together. So you have a book coming out in October. What is I know, it's a little bit of a long lead to talk about it, but I'm kind of excited about it. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is?
Well, it has a very life-affirming title. It's called The Future is History. How to...
Sorry. Okay. Sorry, that's not the whole title. Oh my god. Oh, I love it already. Okay, I'm gonna go pre-order it.
How Totalitarianism Reclaimed Russia. It's, if that's not exciting enough, it's 528 pages.
Great. Even better. Can you tell us a little bit? Can you give us a little preview? You don't need to tell us anything about it. It's okay. I think we get it.
Every couple of years, somebody writes the Russia book to end all Russia books, so it was my turn.
That's it. That's the one. You have said that in a year, criticism will be unpatriotic. Do you still feel that way?
Did I say in a year?
You did say
No,
in a
that's
year.
terrible. I should never be that precise about predictions.
Oh, do you mean sooner than, you mean
the
time is coming?
I mean, there are already areas in which criticism is impossible, right? I mean, again, going back to that speech to Congress, right? There was that moment when he made this, everybody stand up and applaud the widow of the fallen Navy SEAL, and then said we set some sort of record. And then there were items on Breitbart, and then and they went sort of viral. Fake news about Congress members who refused to stand up, which they hadn't actually. And of course, they didn't refuse to stand up because it is impossible. It is unimaginable that a member of Congress wouldn't stand up for what is clearly, a craven, cynical display of compulsory patriotism. So he has a really good nose for that sort of thing, and he also sees how well war plays for him in television.
Do you feel like how intentional do you feel like it is? Because I feel like his word salads are more a function of his wandering mind. It's hard for me to imagine that. I mean, I say it with love. I say it with all the dignity of the office intact. Do you feel like any of it is intentional? Because I'm not sure that it's hard for me to see that. I can't always tell. And I'm not in his brain, thank God. I mean, I don't want to be in there, but do you feel that it is?
I suspect it's instinctive.
Instinctive.
Yeah, but on the other hand, imagine, right, after he fired the 59 Tomahawk missiles at Syria, think about how the picture on television changed, right?
Right.
Because there had been, he would have turned on CNN, and we know he watches CNN obsessively. He would have turned on CNN the night before, and there would have been like 4 or 5 smart people and a Trump person. And in one of those talking head charts, and suddenly, the moment those missiles flew, there were one-on-one interviews with his UN ambassador Nikki Haley. 2 days earlier, Nikki Haley had actually been laughed off the stage at Lincoln Center during
at the Women in the World
during the Women in the World Summit.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I was there. She said it was clear that she was just discovering that there's a world out there, and she was kind of excited about it. But then she was asked a question, a really softball question about soft power, and she said, "We don't do soft power." And the audience, there was like 2,000 people in the audience at Lincoln Center, and the audience laughed and then booed. And then 2 days later, there she was on CNN demonstrating what that actually meant, and getting the respect that is given to somebody who has just demonstrated raw power and not soft power, right? So that picture looks so much better to him. And I think, he's so concerned about his ratings, he's so concerned about how he looks on television, that I think that is actually a lesson that he can take and act intentionally on.
Oh, that's so interesting. What is the thing? I mean, we know that you're afraid of nuclear holocaust because we've talked about that, but what is the... other than that, what is the... what else are you afraid of? What is the thing you're most afraid of, other than the big one?
Irreversible damage to the planet?
Yes, that's a... Okay, that's a good one. I'm worried about that too. Worry about that too. Yeah.
What's your next one?
Oh, that's good. Irreversible damage to the planet. Irreversible damage to the country. I worry about irreversible damage. I worry about reverberations throughout the world. I worry about people getting cut off from the things that they need because of us, because we have someone who mishandles everything and is learning how to be president in real time, and we're watching it. I'm worried about also what he'll do when he finally understands what his own capabilities are. I'm worried about what happens when he learns how to use the toys he has at his disposal. Oh, sorry. Oh my God, I made Masha Gessen upset. All right, I did it. That's what I'm worried about. It's a good one.
Yeah.
And in conclusion, we would like to say, how do you, I think we are, I do have to wrap up. Oh yeah, look at that. Perfect.
You didn't want to end on that uplifting note?
No, I'm not going to end on that uplifting note. I want to ask you, it's something that we had you come on the show to talk about, but I actually think it's important because we are all, you know, those of us who are reading the news and completely immersed in the news stream are really under assault in a way that we were not before. I mean, I'm sure most of us in this room were reasonably politically engaged, maybe very politically engaged, but this feels different. It's very ramped up. From the moment we wake up in the morning, it's like having the tennis ball machine, shooting tennis balls in our face, and it is causing, you know, a derangement in people. Certainly in myself, the people I work with, this is our world. It's very, very hard to take care of yourself in the midst of that. How do you stay afloat? How do you do that? How do you manage your time so that you can be experiencing this new world, but also remaining a human person at the end of the day? Do you turn your phone off? Can I turn my phone off? Am I allowed?
You can turn it off. I don't turn my
But the last time I turned my phone off, I missed all kinds of stuff, and I turned it off for 20 minutes.
You know, actually, when I was living in Russia, I knew that it was really important to leave the country of yourself. Just because, I mean, it does damage your ability to sort of interact with reality and yeah, to be a human in the world. I don't know where Americans would go at this point to sort of take a break. I mean, there's Canada. You can
Where
go
can
sort
you
of
take
air
us?
your head out in Canada.
Can't we all go live in the Shire? So peaceful there.
But I also think, you know, I feel incredibly lucky to be able to speak and actually feel like I'm being heard and read. And I mean, this is a lot more fun than it was 17 years ago to be writing dire warnings about Putin and really being dismissed by everybody.
Right.
So this is actually much more engaging and rewarding. And in that sense, you know, it's not just my experience, but I think we have seen an incredible rekindling of public conversation, of intellectual engagement, of the media conversation, right?
Yes.
We should definitely enjoy it while it lasts. And an added bonus is that the more we enjoy it, the longer it lasts.
Right. I feel as you do. Yes. I feel there is an excitement in the air. There's a passion in the air. You know, I've covered a lot of presidents really satirically, always with something stupid in my head. But there's a feeling that is unmistakable in the air, and I really appreciate that. And now that I'm a citizen and I can vote, I'm so much more a part of it, and it feels much more, it's really dropped in a way that hadn't happened before. It's exciting. I have appreciated talking to you. You've been a lovely crowd. My goodness.
Thank you.
Hey, Masha. Hi, I'm Rob Spillman. I'm the chair of the curatorial committee. One more hand for Masha and Sam. That was amazing. When we were putting the festival together, this is exactly what we wanted to be terrified. So thank you. Thank you but it was a privilege to hear that. And last Monday when we launched we were hoping that this whole week would be a celebration, but also a refutation of nationalism, sexism, racism, and homophobia, and it certainly has been that. We've smashed all box office records, and we've had full houses from the Bronx down to the Bowery. So thank you so much, everybody. And this would not have been possible without our sponsors, and I'm just going to quickly read off them. Penguin Random House, Village Voice, WMYC, the Kaplan Brothers Fund, Horace W. Goldsmith Foundation, the New York City Office of Media and Entertainment, Stavros Narcos Foundation, Embry Family Foundation, the Robert Sterling Clark Foundation, Amazon Crossing, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and FJCs. And this whole week was a true team effort, starting with our amazing curatorial team and the entire Penn staff, most notably the tireless Kim Chan and Julia Torwald. Thank you. Along with our interns and over 100 volunteers who helped at all 37 venues across the city. And of course, none of this would have been possible without our over 200 participating authors and artists from around the world, whose writing and work drives our mission. And this week was only the beginning. Please support these writers and artists by buying and reading their work and defending their right to express themselves. And if you are so inclined, please join PEN if you're not already a member, and be active. PEN is at the forefront of defending free expression around the world. And if you have any questions about PEN, grab anybody with a lanyard, or see the table out there, or check us out on Facebook or at pen.org. And lastly, a big thank you to the City of New York for renewing my faith in the power of story. Thank you all so much. It's been amazing.